questions. Will there be a capital gains tax? Probably. How will it be introduced? What format will it take? Don't know. Will they grandfather it to properties bought before the introduction of the legislation? I doubt it very much. Will it be at 33% or 39% or some ridiculously high rate? And if they did that, it would be the highest in the developed world. I doubt it. Will the national government, if they get back in, reverse the legislation? What government in their right mind would ever reverse a revenue-taking mechanism? Of course they wouldn't. Will they be smart about how they do it? Possibly. Be less aggressive than Labor? Probably. And then the last question is, what impact will it have on property? Will it have on property prices? Australia introduced a capital gains tax in 1985, and Australian property prices have never gone up since. Of course they have. So a capital gains tax plus a stamp duty in Australia has had pretty much zero impact on property prices, and it certainly hasn't stopped them going up. So that's my view, and I just want to get Lisa's view on the impact of capital gains tax in New Zealand.
Thanks, Alan. I realise that there's probably a number of you listening that have got some expertise and working in the tax area with a little bit more sort of knowledge and opinion around some of the operations of this. But I think, look, it's fair from our perspective to acknowledge that it probably is necessary to bring some balance to parts of our tax system. What we understand so far is that the tax working group that's about to release their report may be sort of taking a blunt approach, and I think that the outcome of that is probably going to be what governs the impacts on the market. So until we have a little bit more detail on that, it's a little bit difficult to say, but I guess some of the things that we can consider would be that there would be a change in investment decisions and buying behaviour, could alter demand for bank lending, and also sort of I think the main thing is that if people do decide to hold on to property a lot longer as a result of the legislation, then that may change what kind of stock movements we have in the market, and that could lessen stock movements and increase demand. Just from my perspective, I guess some things to sort of look at that would need to be answered in terms of sort of before we could determine the impact is the tax-free threshold. What years will the marginal tax rates apply? Selling at a loss, will they introduce tax credits again, as you brought up, Alan, the marginal tax rate? So I think there's lots of things that need to be answered before we could sort of provide a better sort of thought around it.
Yeah, the other issue is moving on from that a little bit. Not moving on for it, but is there a risk that Labor tries to shove this through and bring it into force before the end of their term? They'd be nuts to do so, because a capital gains tax will impact every aspect of the tax legislation, and there will be a massive outcry from the professional community against them doing that, because it would just be carnage. And so I doubt very much that the legislation will pass in to before they've had 12 to 18 months to work it through. That takes you into a new term. Now, who in National is going to see this government, see National come into power? Who is the leader that's going to do that? Is there a person in power? That's a whole other discussion. But the point being that, and that leads on to the question that somebody's just asked. Surely National will campaign against a capital gains tax. I don't know that they will, because I don't know that there's enough sort of. I don't want a capital gains tax because it means I've got to pay tax, but it's been talked about for so long, and there is pressure from the global community and many other reserve banks for us to introduce a capital gains tax because of the impact on other economies, that I don't know that they would campaign against it, because they may not be onto a winner. I'm just not sure, and time will tell. So I'm not convinced. But overall, I stick back pragmatically and say, okay, let's again bring it back to basics and say, what impact will that have on demand? Will it mean that people stop needing housing? Well, no. We've still got all these people that need to have housing. So, and then then eventually people can borrow more money, and then prices start to go up. If people see prices going up and they say, well, it means that I just lose 20% of my gain. So I am an absolute believer that capital gains tax will have zero impact on the property market in the medium to long term.